Hey Jude by the Beatles, well, written by Paul McCartney, deep dive into the form, lyrics, melody, and harmony of this classic song that some people call the best pop song ever written, so you can use what I share with you today to take your songs and songwriting to the next level. My name is Dan Spencer. I've written, co-written, and released a bunch of songs on my own and with indie labels. I've also written #1 bestseller music books. It's wild to think that what some people call the best pop song ever written doesn't even have a chorus. And sure enough, we have verse 1, verse 2, and when the lyrics go to anytime you feel a pain, Hey Jude refrain, this acts like a chorus, but it's not really a chorus. I mean, choruses usually have words that repeat, and we see here where this section comes back, to let it out and let it in, Hey Jude, begin. We can see that there's a similar rhyme scheme, but both of these sections here aren't really choruses. They're kind of almost like a bridge, but it does very much change pace and create contrast from the verse. Now, one interesting thing to note here is that this first bridge is written as 2 3-line stanzas, whereas bridge number 2 is written as 1 4-line stanza. And I'm actually going to say that this is the best way to think about understanding the lyrics, because if we look at this, I would actually think that this would go here, match both the rhyme scheme and the length of the lines of the second bridge, bridge 2, bridge 1, bridge 2, who plays it cool by making his world a little colder. So bridge 1 is actually 4 lines, the same as bridge 2. It's just written out a little bit differently. And I think this is one of the things that can make understanding lyrics very confusing for people, especially if you've not looked at a lot of lyrics. What I just did is not a magic trick. It's just I've seen so many lyrics and also written so many lyrics. I'm like, oh, hang on. Here's really the pattern. And then I'm throwing it together so you can see it too. It's actually the same section. The first time and the second time, it's the same rhyme scheme pretty much. It's a similar number of syllables per line, but it's just formatted a little bit differently. But if we think about reformatting bridge 1 and thinking about it as being 4 lines, it'll actually help us make sense of it at a much deeper level and make it much more easy to understand in context of the melody when we look at the melody as well. So there you go. No chorus in this song. There also is a verse 3, and then there is a verse 4 that leads us into an outro. So that's the form. Now let's take a look at the rhyme scheme. Now, while understanding and using rhyme scheme is tremendously useful, if we just look at rhyme scheme alone, it can actually be very misleading for what's going on in the lyrics, and it can actually stop you from writing more intricate and connected lyrics than you would otherwise. Let me show you how and why. So if we look at just the first verse here of Hey Jude, we see the last word of every line. We have bad, better, heart, better. So if we were to say that rhyme scheme, it would be X, A, X, A. X is when there's a line of lyrics and the last word in the line does not match in any way with the last word in any other line. Now, when the last words and lines do match with each other, like here we have better to better, that creates what we call a rhyme. And so we show the rhyme scheme and the connection between those lines. So better sounds the same as better. So we're going to put A and A. Heart doesn't sound like better or bad. Bad doesn't sound like better or heart. So those are going to be X. Now, because better and better are the same words, the type of rhyme is going to be identical. That's when you literally rhyme one word with the same word. An identical rhyme doesn't have to be spelled the same. It just needs to sound the same. For example, flower and flower is an identical rhyme because it sounds the same even though it's not the same word. In the same way, we could have the same word that has different meanings and it's also an identical rhyme, like bank and bank. So I ran up the bank to get to the bank. So it's like, imagine there was a bank on top of a hill that had a bank to it. So you ran up the hill, you ran up the bank to get to the bank where you then banked your money. So bank, bank, bank. Now, if we stopped here, we would be missing some of the most intricate and interesting parts of this lyric. To understand what's going on with this lyric, we actually need to dive inside the verse itself to see what's going on. Because what's happening here is there are internal rhymes. We can see bad rhymes with sad, but it's not rhyming with the word at the end of the line, it's rhyming with the word in the middle of the next line. That's an internal rhyme. Then we have heart, start, another internal rhyme. So this is why just looking at rhyme scheme alone is not enough data for us to really understand what's happening in the lyrics, to be able to take all the gorgeous things Paul McCartney did here and use it for ourselves. But when we overlay the rhyme scheme with a second data point, which is what's happening inside the verse, then we can find internal rhymes, internal connections, and then we actually get a much more fully developed picture of the actual rhymes that are being used to create the feeling of cohesion and play, and also the prosody. Prosody is like the song of the lyrics. So not the actual song, but the actual flow and rhythm and the cadence of just the lyrics themselves. Here's an example of the same idea we just talked about. If we just look at this verse 2 and we just look at the rhyme scheme, we'd have, okay, afraid is X, her, I'm going to call it A, skin X, better. So her and better, this connects through her and the This is going to be assonance, which means a similar vowel sound, which is the and then consonance, which is a similar consonant sound, which is going to be the So we have assonance plus consonance for our rhyme here. Now again, if we stopped here, we would be missing so much of the big picture, because we have afraid, the maid. We have the A diphthong sound, where it's two vowel sounds squished together, A and E, A, and then the D consonant sound. So A, D. That's assonance and consonance connection. And then we have skin, to begin. There again, assonance and consonance connection with the I vowel sound and the N consonant sound. Okay, now I've reworked slightly the formatting for the first bridge here. Rhyme scheme, if anytime you feel the pain, X, rolled upon your shoulder, A, X, A, cool, X, shoulder, A. So we have X, A, X, A. Similar rhyme scheme to what we've seen so far, but as again, we know we've got to go one layer deeper to really understand what's going on with the rhymes. So we have pain, the refrain. We have the A diphthong sound, the N consonant sound. It's going to be an assonance and consonance. Cool. Cool. That's a perfect rhyme. Both words start with a different consonant sound. They have the same exact vowel sound, and they end with the same exact consonant sound, and they are the same number of syllables. And then we have shoulder to colder, which is a double perfect rhyme, or feminine perfect rhyme, because they start with different consonant sounds, and then they both have older, which matches perfectly for both, and the same number of syllables. Going through verse 3, we're going to see a similar pattern play out for what we've seen so far throughout the song. Down, found, her, better, heart, start. So there's an extra one with like the her here. So we have down to found. So again, that's assonance and consonance connection. They both have the ow sound, and they also have the n consonant sound, but found also has the d sound at the end. And we have heart, start. That's a perfect rhyme. Then her to better, we're going to call that assonance and consonant. So we have X, A, X, A. Now in bridge 2, we have in, with, you, shoulder. X, 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 X. But as we know, we need to dive in one layer deeper. We have in, to begin, that's assonance and consonants, the I vowel sound, the N consonant sound. Then we have you, to do, that's going to be a perfect rhyme. They both start with different sounds, and then they end with the same vowel sound, and there's no extra consonant sound afterwards. They're the same number of syllables. You, do. And finally, in verse 4, bad, better, in, better. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. We have XA, XA, the rhyme scheme we've been seeing so far throughout the song, but inside, internal rhymes. Bad to sad, that's a perfect rhyme. Skin to begin, that's going to be assonance and consonance connections. Because there isn't a chorus, there isn't really an area to like celebrate what the song's about, but we can see that Paul McCartney actually gets around that to make this super memorable by repeating a whole bunch of things. A quick shout out and a thank you to Paul McCartney, who made this graph of the number of times each type of word is repeated. The Hey is 6% of the lyric. Jude is 8% of the lyric. Yeah is 6% of the lyric. Nah is 40% of the lyric. And then all other words is an additional 40%. So what we can see is that even though there's no chorus, the title is Hey Jude, and the words Hey Jude take up 14% of the lyric. In addition to that, we can see that the words Hey Jude appear in the first lines of a lot of the sections. Hey Jude, line 1. Hey Jude, line 1. Hey Jude, line 1. Hey Jude. Now, the reason why it's interesting to talk about the words Hey Jude showing up in line 1 is this is a power position. Power position basically just means that the first thing you hear, the last thing you hear are most likely the things you remember. If you remember being in class in school or being in some type of presentation at work, sometimes the first thing you hear and the last thing you hear are the things you actually remember. And the same goes for lyrics. The first thing you hear and the last thing you hear are going to stick with you. And so by putting the words Hey Jude in the first line, or just Jude in the first first line of all of the verses, it actually makes it much more easy for you to remember, hey Jude, because you get that reinforced over and over again at the start of each verse. Now, I don't know if you've seen this graphic before, but I just found this on Reddit and I think it's hilarious. I did not make this. Again, I found this. It's amazing. This actually maps out the entire lyrics for us using a flowchart. So every verse starts with Hey Jude, and then it goes to don't, and then it's either make it bad, be afraid, let me down. And then if you do one of those and it's take a sad song, you were made to, you have found her. And then every verse goes to remember to, and it's either let her into your heart or let her under your skin. Every verse says then you, and then either can start or begin, and then every verse ends to make it better. And so this shows just how effective repetition can be in your lyrics, and also importantly, balancing repetition with new material. Too much repetition can sound cheesy. Not enough repetition can sound like chaos. Now, to talk about the outro is, I mean, it's amazing. So I'm actually going to count this right here from the better. I'm going to call this a bridge. It goes better. And then here's the outro with the na-nas. Wild to think that Hey Jude, again, some people call this the best pop song of all time, doesn't even have typical pop song repetition in the melody. No, indeed. If we look just at the rhythm of the melody, we can see that there are some ideas that get used and brought back, but it's not used and brought back in a way that specifically modern pop music might use repetition. If we were to break the first verse into 4 sections, each section would take 2 measures. The first section, we're going to call this A. Second section, we're going to call it B. The third section, we're going to call it C. Fourth section, we're going to call D. Now, what's interesting about this melody is it does not repeat. It is very common to see melodies repeat with a pattern like A, B, A, C, where you'd have this first part, this A melody, this 2 measures, come back here before we go to the C section, something different. Or even a pattern like A, B, B, C, where this B section would repeat again here before we have the new material. But no, simple lyrics with a lot of repetition. However, the melody, 0 repetition in terms of looking at it from a phrase or subphrase perspective. I'm going to call each one of these 2 measures a subphrase. Now, it is a principle of songwriting that when words last longer, we give them more attention. Imagine if someone spoke very fast and you don't really pineapple. Like, what word did you hear very clearly there? It was pineapple. Why? Because it lasted a lot longer than all of the other words I was kind of sort of saying. In the same way, in songs, when we're taking our lyrics and we're starting to bring them into melody, we can make words last longer and more attention will be paid to the words that last longer. You can see, Hey Jude, Jude lasts a long time. Don't make it bad. Bad lasts a long time. Take a sad song, medium duration, and make it better. Better, long. Remember, better into your heart, lasts a long time. Start, last, better. So if we zoom out and we look at the words that took a long time to sing, it's Jude, bad, sad song, better. Skin, begin, better. And so we can actually see that it's almost like a summary of the story of the entire first verse. Jude, all right, the person, bad, the thing that's happening. Sad song, better. If I just said Jude, bad, sad song, better, skin, begin, better, you might not understand exactly what I'm talking about. But if I just said Jude, bad, sad song, better, that's actually telling us quite a bit of the story of the first verse. A principle of songwriting is that contrast is key. And we can see contrast being created just at the rhythmic level in this first verse of Hey Jude. There's very little syncopation in this first line. Syncopation is when the expected pattern of the music is subverted or changed. Hey Jude, Jude lands on 1. Don't make it bad. Bad lands on 1. Take, starting on the downbeat of 4. Take a sad song, 1, 2. Here's a little bit of syncopation and make it better. Better's landing on 1. It's like every idea is starting on 1. Hey Jude, make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better. This feels predictable. This feels straightforward. Here's where things get interesting in terms of the contrast just at the rhythmic level. If we look at the second line, it starts with an anticipation on and a 4. And then within here, that's syncopation. This is syncopation. This is syncopation. Remember to let her into your heart. and then heart lands it. So this is like an acrobat flipping through the air and then landing right on heart, or a gymnast, indeed. Then you can start here again, anticipation. Then you can start to make it bad. And again, anticipation. So the anticipation starts here before the second line and carries on where every single idea is actually moved backward by 1/8 notes worth of time. Now, I've talked about this in other song analysis breakdowns, but this really reminds me of a more recent song by Post Malone and a whole bunch of other songwriters, where you could clearly see that each phrase was happening in 2 measures, but it was all moved back or moved forward by 1/4 note's worth of time. You can see the OG Paul McCartney showing us how it's done with some anticipation here. Another interesting thing to talk about in terms of just the rhythm is looking at syllabic versus melismatic melody choices here. A syllabic melody is when you have 1 note per syllable of a word. Now, melismatic is when you're going to have more than 1 note per syllable of a word. So for example, here we have syllabic. Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Each syllable gets 1 note. Here again, syllabic. Take a sad song and make it. Now here, better. So we have 3 notes just for the 1 syllable of ter. That is melismatic. So syllabic, syllabic, melismatic. To let her into your heart. All of that. Syllabic. Then you can start. Start. That's melismatic. It, right there, melismatic. Better, syllabic. So when you're thinking about creating melodies, and if you're thinking about creating a melody from lyrics and you've never created a melody before, I encourage you to first just consider the rhythm. Don't try and consider the rhythm and the pitch. We're going to talk about the pitch in a moment here. This melody is almost like a nursery rhyme in the sense that it's very simple, just walking up and down, and we can see some interesting repetition happening at the note level, not really at the phrase level, but coming down into smaller chunks, which we could call motifs. Here we have do, 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 or that's going to be 3/8 notes to then a longer note. Instead of 3/8 notes, it's 2/8 notes and a quarter note to a longer note. Again, 3/8 notes to, it's 1 word. You could think of this as kind of all being 1 note, but it's like 3 short to 1 long. So it's 3 short, 1 long, 3 almost short, 1 long, 3 short, 1 long, again 3 short, 1 long. And then here again, it's kind of like 3 short to 1 long, but it gets 2 notes. It's melismatic, but 3 short to 1 long. So we can see that there is a motif idea here. The motif idea is 3 short to 1 long. And yes, variation within this motif. You know, sometimes there's a quarter note, sometimes there's a melismatic use of rhythm versus the syllable, but that is a motif, an idea that's used, and that's something Paul McCartney's really good at, is taking one idea and then using it over and over again. He does it in many other songs he's written. We happen to be in the key of F major here. And what's interesting too is if we look at the melody contour of these motifs, we can see it's not just a rhythm motif. So which means we're not just looking at the duration of the notes, we can also look at whether the notes are going up, down, how they sound as well. So we have ascending, descending, ascending. We have the ascending, descending, and then descending. So it's like the same idea. It's 3 short to 1 long, and we see it go up and then down a bit. See it just go up, see it go up and down a bit, and then we see it go down. So actually within the motif itself, we can see kind of an A, B, A, C pattern at the motif level if we just consider the direction of the motif. So you can think about this for yourself. You don't have to come up with a million ideas. You can come up with like 1 motif, 1 idea, change it a little bit, and then have that repeat within your rhythm or within your melody to actually take your song to a level where the repetition is happening, but it's happening at a more subtle level. It's happening at the motif level, whereas at the phrase level, there really isn't repetition to speak of. Now let's look at the B section, or the bridge, or the chorus section. As we know, one of the principles of songwriting is contrast is key, and we can see this here because the phrases are actually grouped into measures of 5 instead of measures of 2 or 4, which is really cool and really interesting. But anytime you feel the pain, that's 1. Hey Jude, refrain. And carry the world upon your shoulders. 5. Well, you know that it's a fool who plays it cool by making his world a little colder. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 measures. We talk about some really cool contrast. Now, just looking at the rhythm, we can spot a pretty interesting motif that's reused here. What it is, short, long. We have here, short, long, 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 short, long. And so that's taking, again, the idea of not repeating too much at the phrase level, not even really creating phrases in the way we would typically think about having an antecedent consequent in a phrase, but rather going inside the measures and creating these little micro repetitions using motifs. I think what's cool to see too is that in this B section, this rhythmic figure right here, we can actually see that up here in the verse. And so there's these motif ideas that existed previously in the verse and then bringing them into this B bridge section. And within this bridge section, we also see, just like in the verse where at the end it walks down to F, it walks down to scale degree 1, and we can see the same idea here. Do, 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 do. A little colder. Again, walking down to F. Now it gets naughty. Ba da 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 da, ba da da da. Why is this naughty? Oh, it's a flat 7. What a naughty thing to put in a melody. I mean, my goodness. Sounds awesome. And by the way, if you're going, what do you mean scale degree 1 and what do you mean F? On this YouTube channel, there's a free course for music theory for songwriters. You can go check that out. I made that available to you at no charge. I'll put a link in the description and a link will pop up over there if you want to go save that for later so you can understand a little bit more of the music theory behind how I'm breaking this down and making sense of everything we're talking about here at the melodic and then next harmonic level. And this really, it's a case for learn the rules, break the rules. You might say, yeah, well, Paul McCartney never learned the rules. Well, kind of, sort of, but I would also argue that he had genius level pattern recognition and didn't need to learn the rules. The question is, has your pattern recognition got you to the point where you can write songs at this level? Yes, no. If no, get some music theory. It's going to help your pattern recognition. If yes, good for you. Go rock and roll. You have genius level pattern recognition and I'm very stoked for you. Now within that too, you could say, okay, well, what if I just sit there and work on it for 10 years? Yeah, you can develop your pattern recognition over 10 years, but the question is, do you want to take 10 years to develop your pattern recognition, or do you want to take 5 hours and just learn the music theory and then have it and compress time for yourself? Because I don't believe I'm going to live forever, so why take 10 years when you could take 5 hours? And here we have, this is so cool. So the da-da-da-das, it's like 3 short to 1 long. It has our motif from the verses. It also has the motif from the bridge, which was short, long. I mean, come on. How cool is that? So the rhythmic motif is that we have Hey, which is short, Jude, which is long. That's the same idea that we saw here played out, but at a much smaller level with 8th notes and then 8th notes tied to quarter notes. And then we can see here, we have short, 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 long. Again, is Beethoven, ba, 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 right? That we saw playing out in the verse. Now, let's talk about the harmony. So starting in the verse, we can see it's a lot of 1s, 5s, and 4s. We even have a couple of cadences, and a cadence with chords, we can think about that as a moment where the chords underpin or support the melody in where it's going to either create a feeling of something's not finished or something is finished and done. Anytime we have a movement from 5 to 1, like this, we're going to call it some type of authentic cadence. Authentic cadence is just the fancy music theory term for when we go from 5 to 1 within the same phrase or subphrase. You can see we start off on 1, then we go to 5, different versions of 5, 5, 7 to 1, then hitting 4. Remember the letter into your 1, then 5 back to 1. This is very straightforward. 1, 4, and 5 are some of the most simple, straightforward chords you can put behind any melody you write ever, both in major and minor keys. Now going to the B section or the bridge section or the chorus section, whatever you want to call it. It starts with an F7. F7 is now going to be the 5 of 4, then brings us to 4, 4 major 7, to then a 2, 5, 1, G minor to C to F. What's interesting here too is the 2, 5, 1 doesn't sound cheesy or jazzy, and it's very easy for a 2, 5, 1 to sound jazzy and cheesy. Again, 5 of 4 brings us to 4, and again, 2, 5, 1. Now, here's what's interesting. This F7 here, I'm not calling this a 5 of 4, I'm calling this a 1-7 because to me, the fact that there's the flat 7 being used here, this is blues. Like, this is the blues showing up in Hey Jude. And indeed, we're going to hear a little bit more from the blues and a little bit more rock in a moment. So yes, this 1-7 here, this is not a 5 of 4. I'm calling this a 1-7 because it's the spirit of the blues. If you don't know, the blues is a genre of music, and one of the defining characteristics of the blues is that all of the chords, the 1, 4, and 5, can be used. It doesn't have to just be 1, 4, and 5, but but sometimes when 1, 4, and 5 are used, they are all 7 chords. And that can be one of the characteristic sounds of the blues, in addition to microtones and the juxtaposition of major over minor. You know, having this 5 of 4 to 4 thing, again, this is also kind of bluesy, because a lot of times when the blues have a B section, it actually goes to the 4 chord, and one of the ways you get to that 4 chord is by doing the 5 of 4, the secondary dominant, bringing us to the 4. So some really interesting blues influences here in this incredible pop song of Hey Jude. Let's talk about this outro section, because this is really cool. The flat 7 to the 4 to the 1, but it's not just flat 7 to 4 to 1. If you want to sound cool, establish the 1, then use flat 7 and 4. You're going to sound cool. Sympathy for the Devil by the Rolling Stones also uses this chord progression, among many, many, many other songs. And one of the things that really makes it sound cool, man, it's having the same melody with chords changing underneath it. Sounds so cool. And that's a thing you can use in your own songs. Please let me know in the comments what song you'd like to see me break down next, also what you enjoyed and what you wish I did more of, or what you wish I did differently so I can improve these song breakdowns for you. Don't stop here though. There's going to be more song breakdowns popping up on your screen. Go check out one of those. They're going to be somewhere around here. Go check out those as I'm talking. They're here now. I don't know why you're still here watching me. Go watch me again somewhere else. Go click on one of the other song breakdowns. Go learn some more. Go learn some more. Maybe there's going to be music theory too. You can click on the music theory.